I'm Vance Bastion here with my co host S.A. Baz Collins for this week's Written on the Edge, Season 11, Episode 28 interview. We're joined by Dean Klinkenberg to discuss his novel Murder on the Mississippi, which is book 4 in the Frank Dodge mystery series. So let's get to know our guest. Dean Klinkenberg writes crime fiction carved from the currents of the Mississippi River. He's the author of the Frank Dodge Mysteries, where a restless writer keeps stumbling into trouble on river towns from Minnesota to New Orleans. Cold secrets, crooked deals, and the kind of neighbors who smile while they lie. The river isn't just a backdrop for Dean, though. It's an engine of the stories. He chases its history and characters, then turns what he finds into twists, suspects, and places you can smell and feel. Along the way, Frank Dodge wrestles with the same things the rest of us do: who we are, what we owe, and how to hold on to the people we love when the current gets rough. Dean grew up in the Midwest, first fell for the Mississippi in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and now lives in St. Louis, a short drive from Old Man River. When he's not sending Dodge into danger, he's roaming river towns, filling notebooks, and taking photos for the next mystery. If you like noir with a strong sense of place, start the Frank Dodge series and come and see what the river's hiding. Dean, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. I've been listening to this for so long, so it's a pleasure to be on the other side.
Well, what did you say? Long-time listener, first-time caller?
Exactly.
So we know that especially when you're active and you're out and about doing things, in your case, chasing the river, exploring, and you have your own like river blog and stuff, writing a novel is a totally different beast. It is solitary, you're sitting alone. So I'm curious to know where that passion came from. Like, where did the idea for Frank come from, and why did you decide to start writing long mysteries?
I wish I could say there was like an easy, like straight line to all this, but I've had a kind of a circuitous path to life as a writer. Um, I'm one of those lucky people that had a high school English teacher that was really influential, and I think that person certainly encouraged my writing, made me feel like I was competent as a writer. But I never really entertained the idea of writing as a profession at that stage. Writing was an important communication tool, and I wanted to be as good as possible at it, but I never thought that I might someday try to make a living from it. So I went a different path. I went to grad school and got a degree in clinical psychology. I got a PhD in clinical psychology, and I worked in an academic research institute for about 12 years. And even in that setting, like writing was a major point of emphasis for me.
Mhm.
So, I was writing a lot. We had to write papers for publication about our projects. We had to write grants to get our work funded. And I was a pretty meticulous writer. And I would say I developed into a top-notch academic writer, all of which I had to unlearn is once I decided to start writing
Otherwise,
for
you'd have the
mass market.
driest mysteries on the planet.
Oh, my goodness, yes. So I got tired of that world. I got a little burnt out. I kind of saw a path for me that looked like I was headed toward middle management, and that was not a satisfactory path for me. I'm a little too restless to be stuck sitting at a desk shuffling papers for the rest of my life.
Mhm.
So I made the sort of radical decision to leave that world and try to write for a living. My husband and I had been doing a lot of traveling by then, international travel, and I thought, well, how hard could it be to be a travel writer? Like people are doing this all the time, so maybe that'll be my next occupation. So I quit the job and I did a little consulting, still do a little bit of that, can't completely get away, and then entered the lucrative world of writing about travel. So.
Nice.
And I just didn't think there was much of a focus on the Mississippi River in particular.
Mhm.
So I chose that as the place that I was going to start. Kind of feel like there are a lot of places in the Midwest that don't get their due, and I wanted to shine a spotlight on that part of the river. And eventually, like I had a couple of friends who said, you know, what you probably really ought to do, you ought to write some mysteries that are set along the river. It's very atmospheric. There's so many good stories. Maybe you'll have a bigger audience than people who just want to travel along the Mississippi. So I wrote the first book, I think 2012 or 14. I forget exactly what year that was. And it was really just kind of an experiment because I didn't know if I'd be any good at it. I didn't know if I'd like it. Um, it was awesome. Like I got to make things up. I didn't have to do such meticulous research.
Yeah, that's right. You had to play
Mhm.
God.
Yeah.
Well, so the way I see it, telling a mystery is all about the pieces. So, looking at the pieces that you just mentioned, you are meticulous. What else could a crime writer be but meticulous with all the clues and points you have to drop? You have a place that is alive and thriving. And with your psychology background, the fact that you can develop motive and interest and means, oh my God. So now I have to put all of these pieces together and ask, who is Frank Dodge?
And please tell me
Yeah.
that he drives a Ford, because I think that would be just priceless. The two
I
things I
think
got
that
out of your bio was, Frank Dodge. I'm like, that has got to be the most Midwest name I've ever heard in my life, and I hope he drives a Ford.
that is brilliant, more brilliant than me apparently, because I don't know that I've ever specified what kind of car he or vehicle he drives. A Ford pickup would be beyond his means, at least as we know him right now. So he's driving secondhand vehicles and trying to keep them going as long as he can. So oddly enough, when I started to picture who this guy might be, I started with a guy who was a travel writer who was traveling along the Mississippi, and I just needed to figure out ways that he would get in trouble and become kind of an amateur sleuth. So people naturally assume there's some overlap between him and me, and probably there was some in the beginning, but I think over 4 books, our personalities have diverged quite a bit. But it was a convenient place to start, and I could draw on some of my own experiences and just embellish the hell out of them.
Well,
Uh,
maybe that could be a running joke, though. You could have all of his jalopies that he's having to ride and just start playing with all the car brands that it could be, but just never a Dodge. And then if somebody inquired, why don't you ride, why don't you drive a Dodge? Too on the nose.
I like that. And the next book, maybe he'll rent a Ford.
Yeah, well, yeah, there you
So
go.
yeah.
Nice.
Uh, so part of what I wanted to do with these, I'm not really interested in writing police procedurals. Like it's not really my expertise. I do have a friend who is a homicide cop here in the city that has been a great resource to talk things over with to help me keep some of the details real, but I'm not really interested in the procedural aspect of things. I wanted, yeah, and Frank is an amateur sleuth. And the way we meet him in book one, he had a previous occupation as a therapist. So he's got these instincts about people. So his shtick really is he's good at understanding people and asking questions and understanding some of their motivations and their psychology and using that as a way to essentially get them eventually to uh, I wouldn't say break down, but he eventually solves the crimes by putting together these different aspects that are based more on the motivations than on specific physical clues.
Nice. And as an investigative reporter, that puts him in front of people in the best possible way.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I like about this gimmick is because he's a writer, he's constantly on the move. Every book essentially starts with him getting an assignment to go to some place and then oops, a body shows up and somehow he's, involved in how this body shows up. In the first book it was somebody that he knew that he was interviewing. So in
Which
this book,
made him the suspect, right?
yeah, and that first book, he was considered a prime suspect for almost the entire book. So, so it's a good mechanism to get to move him around to different parts of the river, highlight different communities. I mean, that's part of the agenda too. Like I said, I want to find ways to shine a spotlight on what I think are some of the great places here in the middle part of the country. And this gives me a chance to do it. I can put them in different communities and highlight different aspects of river towns and the different parts of the Mississippi, some personalities of folks who are really connected to the river, some good Midwestern personality types.
Yep.
So
What what era is this written in for
Yeah, I
yours?
wanted to know the time frame.
it's fairly contemporary. We haven't hit COVID yet in the timeline. So I think the timeline started roughly like 2012 or so, probably when I wrote that first book.
Okay.
And it hasn't advanced very quickly. So
All right.
there may be 3 years between books, but there's not 3 years between experiences for Frank Dodge. So
Fair. So book four has him on a riverboat, yes?
yeah. So this is I don't know how many people outside the coast know about this, but like river cruises are a big deal,
Hmm.
surprisingly big deal. So people spend thousands of dollars to spend 10 days or 2 weeks on riverboats on the Mississippi.
Uh-huh.
So, this is a little bit of an homage to Agatha Christie, to Death on the Nile. I was kind of that kind of sparked some of the idea,
Hmm.
but there are there are other backstory to this that really got me going on this particular book. It was a story I've been thinking about for a couple of years. Um, so let me just quickly kind of describe how things play out here. So he's got an assignment he's got this really cush assignment where he's going to spend a week on a river cruise and basically just write about the experience. Like, I would love to have that kind of assignment someday. Just get paid to sit on a boat in luxury and enjoy life and have good food. So that's what he thinks is going to happen. That's what he's signed up for. And he's got a couple of friends that come along with him. So in the Frank Dodge world, there are a handful of recurring characters. He's got a best friend who's a homicide detective who decides to go on vacation with him. He needs a break, so he's on the boat for this trip. And there's an older woman that he met when he was traveling around researching Mississippi River towns, Ruby, who also comes along on this trip. So we've got kind of the core collection of characters on this boat. And at the end of the first chapter, what happens is as they're just sort of walking around, scoping out the boat, getting used, figuring out what's there, they meet a group of three African American sisters, and one of them drops a bomb that the reason they're on this cruise is they believe the men who murdered their father 40 years previously were on that boat, and they were there to find them.
Dun, dun,
So
dun.
the cruise takes a bit of a turn right at the end of the first chapter, and Dodge can't, he's got a strong sense of justice and wanting to see justice served. So it's really hard for him to just stick writing about shrimp cocktails and fancy cocktails, and so he gets pulled into helping investigate, and of course, his buddy, the homicide detective, gets pulled in very quickly too.
Of course.
So is his final summation best murder cruise ever?
Well, I think one of my friends said that, but
Nice.
yeah.
I'm telling you, the
That,
tagline writes itself, you know.
Baz, I'm consulting with you the next time I need some taglines. So.
So, can we take a minute to talk about the tone and voice you use? Because it's definitely noir, but in the modern world. So, it's not like you can say, the man in the suit walked into my office and I had an immediate urge for my cognac.
Well, you could always have him have a dream like that where he's a 1940s gumshoe detective, and then have the people that he dreams about, the characters kind of become real life, and you have a real life. You can play with it in so many ways. That's what's beautiful about it.
Yeah, I haven't come up with a story centered around a dream sequence just yet, but I like that possibility. I could see that especially as a TV, episode, done in black
Yeah.
and white with, yeah.
Yep.
Um, the tone is definitely, I've always loved the hard-boiled noir style mysteries. I like stories that sort of touch on the darker aspects of life without going too deep. These books aren't meant to be completely deep in the mud and muck of all the terrible things that happen in the world. But there's very much an element that we know in first book, when we meet him, he's not in a very good place. Yeah, he is the typical down on your luck kind of amateur detective at the start of the book, and we do learn more about that across time. Things do start to get a little bit better, but he's still getting pulled into these situations where terrible things happen. So, like in book four, in Murder on the Mississippi, the core crime happened 40 years before when a group of four white men murdered the father of these three African American sisters in Vicksburg, Mississippi. So that's kind of a heavy starting point. Um, I I got interested in this story kind of in a roundabout way. That I wrote another book about disasters on the Mississippi, and one of the chapters was about the murder of two men near Vicksburg, whose bodies were pulled out of the Mississippi in the 1960s, who were basically found because the FBI and other authorities were searching for the civil rights workers, the three civil rights workers who disappeared.
Hmm.
At that same time, they were searching for these others, for those three more famous people. The authorities kept pulling, the bodies of mostly black men out of these bayous and swamps and rivers. And these two, were found in the Mississippi. And at the time, everybody pretty much knew who did it, but the men were never charged. And it became one of those stories that much later, the FBI finally got evidence together and charged one of the killers who was still alive. So I wrote about this story in a nonfiction book, Mississippi River Mayhem. And I ran it past one of my African American friends, and she liked it, but she said she didn't like the ending because I tended, we put this spin on stories like this where, oh, we get this happy ending now because this white man finally was convicted and sent to jail. So everybody's good. We could all move on. And she said that's not really the way it works. Like there might be some sense of relief, but white people tend to want to make a happy ending out of all this, and there just really isn't.
Mhm.
So I wanted a chance to explore that story, that dynamic in a different way. And that's really kind of the crux of the motivation for this. So I have three sisters, and I get to use each one as a way to explore very different ways of dealing with this terrible loss and this crime. So they get to show that off in how they their own personal responses to that tragedy throughout the book.
Right.
No,
Do
how old is Frank?
That's a good question. I've never exactly defined it. Let's say he's in his 40s, probably.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe mid 40s. At some point, yeah, I should probably nail down exactly how old he is, but it's
Well,
kind of nice
the
to
only
keep it a
reason I
little
asked is
vague.
because as a detective, that plays a factor in their character. Because if he's been a gumshoe detective who struggles, having a functional car, that says a lot about his character. But you also, if it's many years, that also will add to the character another layer, another color. So that's why I was asking how old he was, because I kind of wanted to get a firmer grip on what his world was like.
Yeah, and really, like he's a writer first, so he's becoming a detective by accident, by circumstance, but he's been a struggling writer since he left his profession as a therapist. So he's still kind of getting, learning what this detective life is like, but he just can't stop himself from pursuing those stories when he comes across them, and sometimes it costs him. He doesn't know, it doesn't always help his writing career. So.
right. Do each of your novels have an element of social justice, or is this your first dip into that?
It's a good question. I think there's always a component of that in there. This is where it's definitely most forward in this book, though.
Mhm. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I ask and I do this anytime we have a mystery writer, how do you approach mysteries just for our other authors out there who may be thinking of, writing a mystery? How do you approach it? Do you do the what I perceive you have the crime and then you back out and figure out where to breadcrumb it? Or how do you approach the whole thing? Because I write about perceptions, which why I'm thinking of mystery because it plays into that whole thing. Perceptions are a big thing for me. And so I just kind of want to know how you look at the genre and how you have crafted Frank's world in order to reveal all of that over the books.
Yeah, I don't know if my approach is the best, but what I do is I always know where I'm starting, what the core crime is going to be, and I know where I want to end, but I have no idea how I'm going to get from one place to the other.
So you're a pantser.
So I'm a discovery writer, as Joanna Penn likes to say. I'm a
Okay.
discovery writer. So I will sit and I might have a few plot points along the way or things that I want to cover. And I know the location, I know where I want to set it. But I kind of like the fun of trying to figure things out as I go along because, in a way, that kind of mirrors what's happening with Frank Dodge anyway. He gets in the situation where something has happened and he's got to piece together how this all came about. So that's basically that's my rationale for how I do
So
it.
do you know who the killers are before you start, or does
Yes.
that also revealed as you write?
No,
Because
I know that from the start, and I
okay,
don't haven't had a process yet where that ended up changing. So
okay, fair enough.
yeah.
Nice. All right, Dean, is there anything about the Frank Dodge series or book four in specific you want to talk about that we haven't thought to ask?
So Frank Dodge is a gay man of a certain age, and we learn more about him as the book goes along. It's not, I don't think it's especially obvious in the first book that he's a gay man, but he's kind of like fighting for his life at that point, and has more important concerns. But over time, he will meet people and have relationships. Um, yeah, I think about this series as kind of like this is a gay man trying to find his way in the larger world. Um, he's not living in an explicitly gay focused community or world. It's the Midwest, you know. There aren't a lot of those sort of bubbles he has the luxury of living in, so he's moving around through these larger worlds and other communities. Um, but I think, you know, they're always, every time I write one of these books, I have kind of a theme in the back of my head to try to loosely organize things around. I just can't seem to do things otherwise. So, uh, identity, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but like a lot of these books, there are some really recurring themes that will pop up. So, I can't help that part of my, I guess, the psychologist training and the way my brain works. There's always got to be something a little deeper going on.
Hmm.
Um, and sometimes there's some dark humor or some good humor. Like the second book is the funniest, I think, of the three, but it was a little hard to come up with humor in a book about, a race murder from 40 years ago. So,
Right, right. All right. Are you ready to talk about your upcoming memoir?
sure,
Can we drop that news on the world yet?
absolutely. Uh,
Breaking.
breaking, just coming soon. Um, I just ran a Kickstarter for this, so there was a little bit of a rollout for that, but the book releases formally on August 25th. It's a collection, it's a travel memoir. It's a collection of stories loosely organized around the idea of getting past, using travel to get past our fears and anxieties about the world and doing things. So, you know, the tagline I came up with this, maybe Baz will approve of this, is it's what happens when you stop asking what happens if things go wrong and start asking what happens if things go right.
Oh, okay.
Something like
Okay.
that.
Yep.
Uh, uh,
So people should look for the title "Better Safe Than Sorry?" Question mark. Now,
but
I'm assuming some of these come from the individual entries, but slow boats, chicken buses, and the radical choice to trust the world.
yeah.
Can we kind of poke at some of those? Slow boats, I think I've got. Chicken buses sound unique.
Yeah. So the stories are kind of a mix of international trips. John and I have taken a few solo trips around the U.S., a couple of Mississippi River trips. The slow boats really refers to a trip we took a few years ago. We were traveling around Southeast Asia, and we were trying to get to Luang Prabang, Laos, and we had a choice of traveling on the Mekong River on a fast boat or a slow boat. And so the story centers around that experience. In Central America, we spent a couple months there many years ago, and chicken buses are just kind of a common way of getting from place to place. They're a cheap form of transportation. They look like U.S. school buses, but because they're mostly local transport, people bring livestock and chickens, and not so much livestock, but definitely chickens, onto the bus, and they can be very crowded. And it's a really interesting way to get a up close and personal with folks who live in the area you're traveling through. So it's a mix of those kinds of experiences. And I think for every essay, what I was trying to do was I was just trying to be transparent about some of the fears and experiences I had before we left, some of the excuses I could have easily come up with to avoid doing many of these trips or experiences, and then what I got because we went through with it, and some of the experiences we were able to have because we pushed through those fears and went ahead and did it. So, yeah.
So I have an odd question that may tie into something you said earlier. Is the radical choice to trust the world tied to one's identity and how one's identity changes when you accept that travel is enriching?
Um, I don't know. I don't know that I was thinking about it exactly that way. I was thinking about it more as just um, we hear so many messages about how dangerous the world can be, about especially outside the U.S. We hear about crime rates here, corruption there. And I think we as Americans in particular, I think we probably enter other countries with an attitude that we're going to be taken advantage of or we're going to be at risk for certain things. So it was my way of trying to reframe that and saying, you know, just do it. Let's just go out there and don't worry about those things. This is all overblown. Trust that people are good for the most part everywhere you go. it helps to have a little skepticism, to question things from time to time. But for the most part, people are going to be on your side and they're going to want to help you out and want to be friendly and help you have a good experience when you're in their country. So,
Well,
That's been my
I think the whole oh, sorry, hold on.
I was gonna say, that's been my experience too. Is the world is much more welcoming than American media gives it credit for.
And it's also, what I think that people need to understand is, FIFA showed us how when you get the politics out of the way, people get along. We
Yeah.
really do. And, and I think as much fear as they had coming over here, it's kind of all kind of we kind of saw each other for the first time, I think, especially in America, where we tend to be USA. But we got to really enjoy other cultures and to see how what and it kind of reminded Americans what we are. We are the melting pot. We are all of the focus of all these cultures, and I think that we could not have picked a better time to have that championship here, because I think it awakened Americans to and reminded us who we are, and it also let other people who may have had those fears, like you said, coming here, especially under this administration. And yet they found that the American people were very welcoming, very, very generous with their time and even money. I've heard people bought the guests dinner or, bought drinks or whatever, So it's really kind of interesting that, when you're putting this out there, this is a good time for that, to keep stoking that, we can all get along. We can all live in the same space in peace, and actually enjoy each other's company and don't listen to the propaganda that goes on out there in the media.
absolutely. And I think part of it is that, right, what I like about it is it gets me out into the world so I can see things for myself and I can
Mm,
see places for myself.
hmm.
So many of the media messages focus on, the bad things that happen, the crimes, the
Hmm.
tragedies of the world. And when we hear about other places, that's what we tend to hear about. So
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you don't do something to counter that, you carry around in your head these images of places as dangerous or tragic. And unfortunately, like, unless you really go out of your way to read something that counters that, you really almost have to go to some of these places yourself
Yeah, well, that's what
to
they
and
found out.
experience it.
Yeah, that's what
Yep.
they found out coming here. And who knew Ranch was going to be the ambassador to the world, But here we are.
For some reason, that feels so Midwestern too, but like,
Yes, but it was invented in California.
fine.
All right. And you said that was August 25th. People should watch for it. Frank Dodge 4, Murder in the Mississippi is out now. Did you have anything else about either topic you wanted to discuss before we jump into the get to know you questions?
Uh, no, if there's a through line through most of what I write, I think it's probably just that idea that we need to get out in the world and experience things directly for ourselves to counter so many of the messages that we're fed. And uh, even in, the Frank Dodge mysteries where terrible things happen, there's a collection of really good people around that. So it's a way to try to balance some of the doomerism that I think is out in the world today. And I hope the work that I'm able to put out there, I hope it sort of, cuts through a little of that and helps people uh, maybe be willing to take a step out themselves and try something new or go someplace they were afraid to go.
Mm-hmm. All right. Baz, take it away.
Okay, before we get to that, just want to say, if you're enjoying the content that we're doing here, please like, subscribe, feed the algorithmic monster that we all have to do on social media. If you want to support us, because there are costs involved with producing things like this and bringing you queer content creators for the community, then please consider supporting us financially through patreon.com/rope podcast, or do a one-time donation at buymeacoffee.com/rope podcast, or you can do the join membership here on YouTube. And it's just 99 cents a month. You get Albert's and my reactions to queer media. I'm introducing my co-host Albert, who is a gay man living in Mexico, who often doesn't get exposed to a lot of our content of queer media. So it's kind of his first time reactions. So that's always a fun thing. And you get it in watch along format where you get a little bit of the beginning, a little bit in the middle, a little bit in the end, just so you can sync up your version of the movie or TV series that we're reacting to along with our commentary. So that's another way that you can help support us. And if you do, we greatly appreciate it. And if you are unable to support us financially, please just do the sharing and the hyping and all of that stuff, because we're trying to do this to as a service to our community. So with all of that out of the way, are you ready for getting into the weeds? Here we go. What book, film, or piece of art has had the biggest influence on your writing style?
I'm a huge fan of Kurt Vonnegut.
Oh,
I like
okay.
his writing style because it's very straightforward. He's not trying to use a lot of fancy words or come at it from a literary perspective. It's just very down to earth,
Hmm.
and his writing style has a big influence on me.
Okay. What fictional or historical character would you invite to march with you at a pride parade?
You know, I thought about this, and there's so many possibilities. I think I'd want to march with Oscar Wilde. Like, as if nothing else, he would be entertaining. Like, if
Br-
the parade itself turns out to be a bore, he would not be.
right,
So,
right, exactly. Just remember to bring your green carnation. Um, if you know, you know. Um, if you or your protagonist had to survive a gay bar karaoke night, what song would you or they belt out?
um, you know, I have a feeling that Frank Dodge is not really one, my character in the mysteries is not really one that's going to show up in a karaoke bar in general. But I kind of feel like it would be really entertaining if somebody would make him sing "Song Sung Blue" by Neil Diamond.
Ah,
I,
okay.
I don't have any specific rationale for that. It just popped in my head. It's like, boy, it would be really fun to make him sing that and just to see what would happen because he would be so uncomfortable with it.
Or sing by, the one Kermit Frog song. Something really, really off the character mark. I get you. I get you.
Yeah.
All right. All right. What's a place, real or imagined, that feels like home to you and why?
Well, I mean, the easy answer is like, I've been spending so much time along the Mississippi River here, and it touches me at a deep level. I find time along the river very calming, and I feel connected to a bigger world when I'm spending time on the river. So I've done a lot of camping and paddling trips on the Mississippi, and it's just a completely different experience from the day-to-day world of, sirens blaring around me and cars honking at me and waiting in line at the grocery store. It's just a very calming, connecting kind of experience. So I hope everybody has a place like that where they get that feeling.
Okay. Well, what's the strangest or most unexpected place you've ever found for an inspiration of a work of yours?
Uh, the strangest or most unexpected place. Um, That's a much harder one. I've traveled so much. I think there probably have been places around the world or experiences that I've had from travel that opened my eyes up to something I hadn't seen before. I think probably just in general, one of the things that I like about travel and the way my husband and I travel is that it's generally off the beaten path and more independent. So it opens us up to experiences that completely shatter some of our perceptions of the world or even the places that we're visiting. So I mean, that's kind of a general answer, but I kind of feel like that's part of the core reason that I travel is because it shuffles my brain and my beliefs almost every time we go somewhere.
Okay. I was hoping it was going to be something like, in a dive bar in stall two in the men's bathroom when you run out of toilet paper, that kind of thing, but hey, I'll
I've
take
been in
what you
plenty
got.
of I've been in plenty of dive bars, but I don't haven't quite had that experience yet. So
Okay, okay. Well, it's coming up. As I've always said for gay men riders, Agnes Moorehead is our muse, and she likes to mess with us. All right. Which themes or motifs do you find yourself returning to again and again in your work?
I think probably one of the common themes in the fiction, especially, is I like to really play around with the idea of how we think about ourselves, um, and and how the images that we present to other people, and how easily those can be shaken up, and what happens, when you realize you're not quite who you think you are.
Okay, I like that. Okay. And finally, what's a piece of LGBTQ plus culture, music, film, art, or history that never fails to inspire you?
Yeah, this is an easy one for me. I don't know if you remember the film Parting Glances from
Uh-huh.
the late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Steve Buscemi, one of his early films.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that film, I remember watching that in the late 80s and just thinking it was um, such a great portrayal of the lives of gay men in a particular area in a particular time that didn't just delve into stereotypes and caricatures.
Yeah,
They were fully developed people. The story wasn't completely resolved at the end,
right.
but I just loved that movie so much, and I still go back to it every now and then to watch again. It never fails to satisfy my desire to watch a good movie.
I'm right there with you. All right. Well, you made it through our list. Bravo.
All
Nicely
right.
done.
Do have
So,
one small, real quick question. Have you ever seen the movie American Dreamer with
American,
Joe Beth Williams and Tom Conti?
I don't think so.
You need to find it as a mystery writer because it's one of the best stories. It's a comedy. It's a romantic comedy, oddly enough, and a mystery, a murder mystery. But she's a housewife trapped in Ohio, and she decides to enter a contest to write a murder mystery in the style of her favorite author. And so she does, and she ends up winning. And then she wins a trip to Paris to meet said author, not knowing that his mother is the face of the author who writes these stories. So she thinks it's a woman, and it's actually Tom Conti. He's using his mom as a facade to write these very very romanticized murder mysteries. But the thing is, she gets mugged, and she hits her head. And when she wakes up, she thinks she's the character in those murder mystery novels, and
Oh,
she
cool.
invents a whole international mystery in it, and it's hysterical. But for you, you definitely need to watch it as a mystery writer. It'll become one of your absolute favorites.
All right, I'll look it up. And it's not to be confused with the movie Dreamer about a
No,
hapless bowler
yeah,
from
no,
the
no, no. It's an
1980s,
American
whatever.
Dreamer, and the bonus is it has Coral Brown from this movie, who plays the mother of the writer. So you get, Coral Brown in there. So yeah, so it's a big added bonus.
nice.
Awesome.
So, Dean, you are promoting Murder on the Mississippi. You're about to start promoting your memoir. Where can people look for more updates on either appearances or signings, or even just other interviews you'll be doing?
I try to keep most of that up to date on deanklinkenberg.com. So
Perfect.
I maintain two websites, and one is more Mississippi travel specific. So if you're interested in travel along the Mississippi, it's MississippiValleyTraveler.com.
Okay.
But everything else, I'm moving most everything over to deanklinkenberg.com. So the mysteries are all described there. The memoir has a page now, and pretty much everything I do going forward will be on that page, including events and appear, etc.
Child, why don't you have a YouTube channel? That's what I want to know.
Well, I do, but right now I'm only
Yes.
posting podcasts to it.
Well,
So
yeah, but
yeah,
you got travel that's a big niche in YouTube. You could definitely do that. And you can even highlight your books while you're talking about them.
right. Part of the dilemma for me is like as I have absolutely loved writing about the Mississippi and traveling along the river, but it's a very tiny niche, and I've never been able to make it financially sustainable.
Mm.
So I'm going to keep traveling along the river, but probably except for the mysteries, I'm going to be doing writing historical fiction novels next. That won't be set necessarily along the Mississippi, but in other parts of the country. So, so yeah, maybe there'll be a YouTube channel for some of the history that I come across.
And like I said, you could work your books in by saying, "This is why I set my book so and so, in this location because it's really, really fascinating." Come along it's perfect marketing material for your books as well. You could weave the two together and make it apparent. Like if you're trying to merge them all into one website, you can use that as a mechanism to tie it. It's a good way to do it.
Well, and here I was going to ask what's up next for you, but you just dropped the historical fiction. Are you talking about any details about the first one yet, or is it still kind of under wraps?
No, it's not. It's not a secret. It's going to take a little while to finish all the research for it. But the basic. One of my major hobbies is genealogy. I'm really into learning about my family history, and we have one particular line of my family that goes back to the American Revolution. So the first book is going to be centered around my third great grandfather who fought in the Revolution, and then follow him and his family for the first 40 or 50 years of their life after independence. So. It's very loosely based on them. I mean, it's fiction, but I'm kind of using the lives of people in my family as inspiration for the stories, but then using what I know about the history of the time to really fill things out. And I really just want to tell stories about American history from the perspectives of regular folk rather than from the famous people that we know. So nobody remembers the name Cyrus Hill except those of us who are related to him. But his experiences were really interesting. And I think that story needs to be told. And life wasn't always easy. Like it's going to be kind of like, the mysteries in a sense that it's not, I don't write cozy mysteries and I don't write fiction, historical fiction just to make people feel better about who they are. It's going to be honest accounts of the lives of people during those times. So that's the next big challenge.
Plus, I think that
Nice.
I think the good thing is, in the Midwest, because so few things are set there, that you have a way of highlighting all of the history that is there, by writing the books that you're writing. So I think people need to really consider your works, because it's a way to see the flyover portion of the United States, and you can use natural historical sites as sequences for your books and stuff. So it's great fodder to work with as a writer. So I commend you for doing it all, because I think it's a really good thing. We have a ton of mysteries set in San Francisco. We have a ton of mysteries set in Gotham City and in New York. We have a ton of them in Chicago. So it's nice that you're doing something that's off the beaten path. And I really think people should deeply consider looking at some works of yours, because it's a good way to really discover a part of America that most people ignore.
Right.
Amen.
Yeah, you hear that, Netflix? Option this guy.
All right,
I'd be
Dean.
good with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no kidding. Dean, do you have any final words of wisdom for our fans, friends, and listeners?
Come to the Midwest. Come explore this part of the country if you need to know about. I think the Mississippi corridor is one of the most amazing parts of the country in general. Come here and spend some time getting to know us and getting to know our landscapes, and bring along a Frank Dodge mystery while you're here.
Nice.
There you go. There
Love
you
it,
go.
love it. All right, we'd like to extend a huge thank you to Dean Klinkenberg for joining us today. Dean, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun talking with you guys.
Yay.
Well, come back when the next one comes out.
Yeah, when you're ready to start announcing that historical fiction, come back and talk to us.
Absolutely.
Yay! All right, folks, we at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. If you enjoy learning about new artists or hearing our thoughts on entertainment media, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. Our show was produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.worldpodcast.com. Tune in next week for your queer media fix.
Bye now.
Oh, what's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.